I brought with me her star, the star that she wore before the concentration camp in Holland, with Jude on it for Jew.
She has to come back. I am confident she will come back.
There's no doubt that he's done many things that many people regard as wrong, but the law distinguishes between sin and crime.
Bit of an update. The 3 injured passengers no longer injured.
At last, bit of good news.
No, they're dead.
This is what it looks like.
And anybody watching you, Vernon? Oh no, sit down, Vernon.
The impeachment of a president, the case facing Donald Trump, will begin in the Senate later. Questions remain, though, about whether witnesses will be called and whether Mr. Trump himself will be forced to testify. It's something his lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, isn't so keen on. He's been speaking to Sky News about the case he'll put forward in defence of Mr. Trump.
My wife had great reluctance, and in the end, President Trump spoke to my wife. And my wife made the arguments why I shouldn't do it, and we've had to think this through very hard as a family. I'm a liberal Democrat. I voted against President Trump. I will argue that the 2 articles of impeachment don't satisfy the constitutional criteria. The constitutional criteria are treason. Nobody has alleged that he's committed treason. Bribery, although there's been discussion of bribery, he wasn't charged with that. Or other high crimes and misdemeanors. I interpret other high crimes and misdemeanors to require criminal conduct, not abuse of power.
So are you arguing that even if he has done something which some people might regard as wrong, it is not impeachable?
There's no doubt that he's done many things that many people regard as wrong, but the law distinguishes between sin and crime.
Donald Trump wants to testify. Do you think he should?
No. All of my clients want to testify all the time. They want to tell their story. But it's far better to let the prosecution, in this case the House, put on their case and then let it be rebutted.
Is it because you think Donald Trump is a weak witness?
No, I think that Donald Trump would fill in gaps. That's what happens. Good prosecutors ask questions and lay perjury traps.
But what about other witnesses, like Lev Parnas, an associate of Rudy Giuliani, who recently said the president knew all about the pressure campaign in Ukraine?
In the end, a lot of his statements on television are hearsay or double hearsay, but I have no problem with witnesses coming on if the Senate decides they want to hear witnesses on both sides.
Why do you think the president picked you, and what has he said to you?
Well, I can't tell you what the president said to me, but I can tell you why I think he picked me. I have written 2 books and many, many articles on why I believe the framers did not intend abuse of power, obstruction of Congress, and other open, vague terms to constitute impeachable offenses. I think the president's read what I've written, he's seen what I've said, and it suits his defense. I'm just a part, an important part, but a small part of the whole team. I'm making the legal argument. He has other lawyers who will be making the factual arguments.
Lord Hall is to resign as the BBC's Director General after 7 years in the job. His departure takes place when the corporation's future in its current form is being questioned.
I think there's a dangerous period ahead for the BBC because there are many in government, including the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who don't really like the idea of the BBC being funded as a public service broadcaster through the licence fee. So I think the BBC's got to maintain and sustain public support and rapidly get its own house in order.
I've left because I've enjoyed it enormously. I've had a great time, thank you very much. And, you know, one of the things which matters to me is knowing when the right time is to go, and I love the organisation. It's always going to be difficult to leave, but this is the right moment.
And what do you think the future will hold for the BBC?
Oh, I think the future of the BBC and for British content is great. I think the fact that we've shown just what a creative hub we are, creative organisation we are, in, you know, over Christmas, over New Year, you see the figures now for iPlayer, for BBC Sounds. It's fantastic, and I think we've just got to have the confidence to go forward in a new world, which is always changing. But as I keep on saying, the arguments for the BBC, I think, are stronger now than they've ever been, and I will carry on making those arguments in the future, and whoever takes over from me, I'm sure will make those arguments. So thank you very much.
And more to be done on the gender pay gap?
There's always more to be done on change in the BBC, cultural change. You know, we've done a lot, we are doing a lot, and we've been leading the way in all sorts of ways, but you know, you can never stop, and you just got to keep working all the way at getting these things right. And I'll carry on for the next 6 months doing that, and I'm sure my successor will.
Police are to give road safety training to all staff at the RAF Croton base in Northamptonshire after the death of Harry Dunn in an accident nearby. The 19-year-old died in a head-on collision with a vehicle believed to be driven by the wife of a US diplomat in August of last year. At the weekend, police revealed that diplomatic cars were driven on the wrong side of the road in 2 separate incidents near to the base. Let's speak to Harry Dunn's parents, Charlotte Charles and Tim Dunn. We've been hearing from the local police force in your area saying lessons haven't been learned. They're still driving on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah, you know, we've been aware of many incidents of this nature for a while now. Many people are coming forward. We feel we have no choice but to try and make that public. The fact that the Northamptonshire police are now agreeing to, work with the base, or the base are now agreeing to work with them, I should say, and accept this driver training is a good step in the right direction. It's a small step, but it's a very much appreciated step and pretty vital, I think.
Tim, too little too late for your boy, of course. She has been certainly charged over Harry's death, causing death by dangerous driving, but the US has called it highly inappropriate. How hopeful are you that she will be brought back to the United Kingdom to face justice?
Yeah, she has to come back. I don't see how they can see highly inappropriate, but I am confident she will come back. We've seen the support from the country and support we're getting now from other parts of the government. At the end of the day, this lady has killed our son by an accident, but she has to answer for that. There could be no reason why they can keep her there. She needs to come back to face what she's done. Nobody's above this, above the law for killing somebody. So I truly believe that she will come back. Yes.
We don't know when, but she will be. Whether it's this administration or the next, we will work for as long as we have to make sure that she does return here and face our justice system. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's certainly the allegation against her, Charlotte. You did go over to the White House. You met the President, both of you, I believe, and you were given the opportunity to meet Mrs. Sekulis. You decided at that time that you didn't want to. How do you feel about that now?
Absolutely still stand by our decision. It was completely and utterly the wrong environment to have that thrown upon us, for her and for us. We were open to meeting her. We were over there with, good intentions to plead with her to come forward to meet us, or to come back to the UK, I should say, to meet us and to go through the justice system. But to be thrown into a situation where we could have potentially met her, we had no therapists around us, no mediators. She, I believe, would have needed the same. So absolutely, we stand by our decision that we made as a family. Completely unhealthy situation for her family, for her and for us, definitely.
Now, the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown has warned that the United Kingdom is at breaking point. He said that too much power is concentrated in London and called for the nations and regions to get a real voice in decision-making. Well, I spoke to him and began by asking whether he thinks Brexit risks breaking up the United Kingdom.
I think getting Brexit done is in danger of leaving Britain undone. And I think we've got to face up to the fact that unless we change fundamentally our constitution, Scotland may secede from it, and the regions will feel uncomfortable within it. And I believe that Boris Johnson cannot just have cosmetic measures like moving the House of Lords from London to Birmingham or Leeds or to York. There's got to be substantive change. Because what we've seen in the last few months is people are very fed up. They're fed up with stagnant wages. They're very fed up with public services that have been deteriorating. They're fed up also with zero-hour contracts. They're fed up with boarded-up town centres. And if we are going to do something in the regions and in the nations of the country outside the centre of London, then the regions and nations must have a voice.
That's what I want to talk about, Scottish independence. It's there, it's clear. Nicola Sturgeon says the clamour is growing ever louder.
But what if the United Kingdom changed? See, this is my point today, that she's assuming that she wants a referendum on no change versus independence. What's going to happen in the next few months is the United Kingdom is going to be under pressure to change its own constitution. And Scotland maybe feel far more comfortable within a United Kingdom that starts to change and amend and give a voice to the regions as well as the nations, and might be far more comfortable if the reallocation of resources in the United Kingdom helps the outlying areas, helps the Midlands, helps the North, helps Scotland and helps Wales.
Nicola Sturgeon is talking about an independence referendum next year.
Well, there's no case for having a referendum at that time. There's no case because the two arguments that she put forward for a referendum have not been met. One was that we had completed and knew what the relationship with Europe was going to be. We don't know. We know we're leaving, but we don't know what the future relationship is. Now, by the time that her timetable is out of date, we will still not have had an agreement on what the future relationship with Europe is. So that argument has fallen. She then said that she would have a referendum if she would have a consistent majority of support in Scotland for independence. And there is no such majority in Scotland at the moment that's either been consistent or decisive or overwhelming. In fact, there is no consensus on it, and it's a divided Scotland on these issues.
Well, events are taking place across the world over the next few days, marking the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. UNESCO is holding a day of commemoration in Paris in memory of the victims of the Nazi concentration camp. And of course, next week, it's Holocaust Memorial Day. Well, joining me now is Lord Finkelstein, Daniel Finkelstein. His mother was held at Bergen-Belsen, but survived the Holocaust. She died in 2017. I noticed that you said on social media you were going to talk about your mother this week and her experiences. Why?
Well, because this week is the 75th anniversary of them being on an exchange. My mother, her two sisters and her mother on an exchange from Belsen, which is very rare. 50,000 people died in Belsen in the end, partly because Auschwitz was liberated and people came from Auschwitz as the Allies advanced and the Russians advanced. They came into the middle of Germany from lots of different concentration camps and ended up in Belsen, which couldn't cope with it. And lots of people died of typhus like Anne Frank did. My mother was fortunate. After about a couple of months of that, she was on an exchange. Only 300 people were ever exchanged from what was supposed to be an exchange camp. But she had some fake...
What does the exchange mean?
And it means that she had fake, basically, or false Paraguayan passport. And people who had those were able to be exchanged for Germans who lived in Allied occupied countries. Although I say they were able to, in fact, it hardly happened. 136 people with that sort of documentation were ultimately released to Switzerland. My mother was fortunate enough to be one of them. That meant that in those very last few months, the family wasn't there anymore, although my grandmother was already ill enough that unfortunately when she arrived in Switzerland, saw the girls to freedom later this week, 75 years ago, later this week, she died that night.
And what was the experience of your mother's family in the Nazi period?
Well, my grandfather was one of the leaders of the German Jewish community and one of the archivists of the anti-Nazi movement. He moved his archive to Holland and then he had to move it to London. He opened it at the beginning of the war, but unfortunately, when he sent back visas for his family, they didn't arrive in time. So they were trapped in Holland. Eventually, they were taken to the Westerbork transit camp, from which most people ended up in Auschwitz or Sobibor, including my mother's aunts. But my mother and her sisters and my grandmother ended up in Belsen.
And this is obviously 75th anniversary, the three-quarter century. It's a milestone. But do you feel that we are forgetting?
Well, actually, I'm a bit more optimistic than that. I think we're beginning to remember. Because when my mother originally came, people to America, actually, where she was, people wanted to know, she came from Holland, did she wear clogs? But they didn't know anything about the concentration camps. Sometimes when she came to this country, she would, at a dinner or something, she would happen to mention her passed, and people were completely amazed by it because nobody talked about it. And it wasn't, I'm actually conscious really of the first time my mother began to talk about it in public. Not because she didn't talk about it, she was very open about it, but because people weren't that interested. And so she began to tell her story. She went to lots of schools. I brought actually with me her star, the star that she wore in the concentration camp, not before the concentration camp, in Holland, with Jude on it for Jew, the yellow star, which my mother always said they had to actually pay for those. They had to pay for them. They had to pay to buy these stars and then sew them on themselves, extraordinarily.
But it wasn't offensive. You didn't.
But it wasn't offensive. You did not have it. Yes. And ultimately, as I say, they were arrested. They went to Westerbork. But I do think people are taking an interest in this because there's a recognition of the value of the sort of demonstration that the Holocaust makes of the value of liberal democracies, and therefore people are increasingly keen to talk about what happened.
Now, the sad news we brought you earlier on, the death of Monty Python star Terry Jones at the age of 77. His family released a statement saying that he had been fighting a long, extremely brave, but always good-humoured battle with a rare form of dementia. Well, fellow Python John Cleese has been leading the tributes to Terry Jones.
He was a remarkable fellow because he had endless energy and enthusiasm. We almost used to laugh at him sometimes. I remember he got up one day when we were shooting on the south coast and he got excited about how green the grass was. Do you see what I mean? So that there was this hugely lively energy in him, which was very, very attractive.
It is a sad day, but the warm memories and the laughs, that's what gives me great pleasure, remembering the times we all had. We were a whole gang who wrote for David Frost, Python before they were Python and the Goodies before they were the Goodies. And that's when we all met up together. Mike Palin and Terry Jones, you know, and Graham Chapman and John Cleese and so on. And we were a gang, and Terry was an amazing, lively member of the gang. And then emerged as a very talented director, of course, subsequently, working on the Python films, Life of Brian, Holy Grail, now for something completely different. He was just a joy to work with. David Frost, he got us all together from all sorts of places. I'd been writing for nightclubs and all sorts, and he saw me once, and then I became part of the gang. And we'd all get together in the room, as you indicated, a whole gang of us, and then we'd all play football with a tennis ball in this church hall. And the atmosphere was just amazing. And I never wrote alone. You would pair off with various people writing together. And it was a communal effort, and one of the happiest times of my life, and Terry was part of it.
The genius who brought us the thick of it, Armando Iannucci, has been imagining what tourism might be like in space and what would happen when 5,000 people are stranded for 3.5 years in a luxury space cruiser.
Bridge crew, listen up. I need a course back to Earth. There's a lot of people counting on us to get them there.
Everything is fine.
Bit of an update. The 3 injured passengers no longer injured.
At last, bit of good news.
No, they're dead.
It's set in the world of space tourism in 40 years' time. And there's these fleet of spaceships owned by a guy called Herman Judd, and he's named them after famous streets in Manhattan. So there's Avenue 4, there's Broadway, there's Lexington, Avenue 5. And it's the maiden trip to Saturn and back. Normally takes 8 weeks, 5,000 passengers, 1,500 crew. Something goes wrong, it's going to take much longer than that, maybe years. So you're then faced with the question, what do 6,500 people who have nothing in common other than that they are trapped on a massive luxury hotel, what do they do and how do they go about? It's really about how do you, it's like Lord of the Flies, really.
Yeah, of course a comedy, but it's also, it's dramatic. There's elements of drama amongst it as well. There is, watching it, you're genuinely thinking, what's going to happen now?
Yes, I've kind of structured it in a way that every episode ends on a bit of a cliffhanger or a major revelation or a twist, really, because I kind of like that. And maybe it's my experience of working on HBO. you know, their thing is we want to make people... They don't stream all the episodes at once. They want people to come back the following week. How do we do that? And it allows you to start thinking about not just the episode, but the series as a whole, and do something a bit more interesting.
Let's talk about a man who has been sitting in a barrel, suspended some 80 feet above ground for more than 2 months, who has just made it into the Guinness World Record book, not for the first, but for the second time. This is Vernon Kruger, who has broken the world record for remaining in a barrel at the top of a pole from Doelstrom in South Africa. Vernon, welcome to you. You're already giving us a view of your view. 80 or so feet above the ground. There is only one question. Tell us why.
Well, I don't know really. I've forgotten why I'm actually up here. I had a few good reasons, and most of them I've forgotten since I've been here. But no, I'm attempting to break my own world record. Well, I have broken it now. 22 years ago, I set the record. That was actually a British record, which I broke. It was 54 days, I took it to 67. And this time, I'm probably going to try and push it to about 80, if possible. What's different this time is we have social media, so I feel quite connected to the rest of the world. Yeah, I can look at the people below, and I talk to people all day long. So it's not really that cut off from the world, as one would imagine. I do exercises in the morning. I have someone that leads me in exercises from below the pole. So I do get enough exercise. I can stand up and I can stretch. Half of my body sticks out when I stand up, but it's not very big. It's 500 liters. I can just curl up in a fetal position. So I do wake up with a lot of aches and pains.
Share the view with us and stretch your legs while you're at it. Don't get too close to the edge.
I've got the flag up here, so it's taking up a lot of space.
Yeah.
Just go where the record is. Yeah, this is what it looks like.
And anybody watching you, Vernon? Oh no, sit down, Vernon. Yeah.